My name is Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates, and I'm the host of the most powerful hour on the radio, Mental Dialogue on Glance Radio, every Sunday night, 7 to 8 p.m. Check that out. Tonight's Peace of Mind is in reference to Edward Snowden, the NSA whistleblower that let us know our government does spy on us as Americans. First of all, I would like to clarify specifically that I am no longer a conspiracy theorist. I've been long removed from that. I went through a period in my life during my early college years in which I became aware of the so-called Illuminati and things of that nature and world government, and became very fearful of all the powers that be. And years later, just through more rational thinking, realized that I was making this all-powerful boogeyman out there that literally controlled everything. So there was no reason for me to aspire to anything, because everything was designated and controlled by this all-knowing group. So I've been through that period of my life, so I make a strong clarification for people to understand that I'm not a conspiracy theorist any longer. And the reason being mostly is not that some of the theories that are out there about world government or how our government is ran and is trying to control everything, especially in light of the Snowden case or situation as we have right now, because nobody knows exactly where he's at over in Hong Kong, as he's seeking some type of asylum there in reference to sharing the information about what our government does to spy on Americans. From what I understand, he's possibly also shared with the Chinese that we actually spy on them. And this is all after a few months ago, President Obama actually reprimanded or admonished China for their number of years of trying to break into our computer system and spying on us. So from what I understand, Snowden is now showing us to be the hypocrites that our country can be on certain issues. But I say all that to say, being a former Air Force member, that as still a lover of our country, but dissent is a American as apple pie, and so I choose to dissent. But not, as I said, not as a conspiracy theory, because the reason that I choose, like I said, not to be, because one, with more rationalized thinking, you can always work backwards from a conspiracy. So whatever conspiracy you put out there, whether it be the 9/11 conspiracy that the government has something to do with the attacks of 9/11, then you can always work backwards and, in a sense, make sense of the conspiracy that you already assume to be, and it make a lot of sense. But that's despite any facts out there that would negate that. So I'm not a believer that our government had anything to do with 9/11, because we had things in places that may have thwarted that event, possibly, and that's what we've learned since. And so clearly we've gotten into a time where our government now sees reason to monitor private communications to the extent that they would like to thwart any future terrorist acts that may exist. With all the monitoring that they seemingly are doing based on Snowden's information, unfortunately they were not able to stop the Boston Marathon event. But as I said, that's not, in a sense, a failure, as I so-called heard Sarah Palin making towards this administration, once again politicizing in a situation that doesn't need to be politicized. If there's ever should be bipartisan acting in favor of the people, it needs to be now, during the possible tyranny that is before us. Thomas Jefferson once said that experience have shown that even under the best forms of government, those entrusted with power have in time and by slow operations perverted into tyranny. So that's something that our open society here in America, our democratic society, is always at risk of. And so I do feel that Snowden is a traitor, in the sense that, and some have call him a hero this week. I heard one talk show host even refer to him as a Paul Revere. If you know Paul Revere, his story in American history, basically riding through saying the British are coming, the British are coming. And I guess, in a sense, Eric Snowden being likened to Paul Revere is saying the government's coming, the government's coming, I guess, is what we're being exposed to. So as a lover of America myself, I don't understand his motives to go to Hong Kong and reveal to the Chinese that we spy on them as well. There's a reason why that information is kept secret. Some will say, well, it's kept secret so that they can continue to do it to us. And of course, this is always all under the skies of protecting Americans. And so, but I do think we have gotten enough information to know that the quote that Thomas Jefferson laid out, we are at risk of that. And so I do think we need to wake up, America, and realize that we may be on the brink of turnkey tyranny, that as Snowden has said. So I'm not trying to invalidate him simply because I think he is misusing the information to give it to other countries, which is a traitor in my eyes, as well as for anybody that even thinks of him as acting as in civil disobedience, as a Martin Luther King did as he sat in the jail from Birmingham. I do want to distinguish and say this is not the case, because civil disobedience is obviously breaking the law with the intentions of understanding the consequences of those laws. So when Edward Snowden goes and leaves the country and seeks some type of asylum, then effectively he's trying to avoid the consequences of those laws. Now clearly he's, as people will say, well, he's just doing it out of fear of his life because of how the American government could be, and conspiracy theories will all jump out on that. And I'll say, well, one thing he has done by making himself a well-known whistleblower, unlike others who typically in the past have attempted to remain anonymous. Well, I will say in this sense, by making it known, that I think he's taken that aspect off the table. I think that could be a well calculated thought on his part on why he's made himself known. But like I say, that's just an opinion there. That's just thinking, which is something we don't do as a country anymore. And I say that to say, right now we are ripe for the picking if our government did want to move forward, because even Snowden said that his biggest fear is nothing will get done, even as a result of him leaking out this information. And that is a strong possibility, I believe, because we are now a society of slacktivists, and so we are at risk of no longer carrying on the legacy that has come before us, because our country was founded on dissension, and meaning that tyranny was the last thing that the people before us, and even in the African American community, whether it was tyranny within the country or from outside the country, we never stood for it. And now have gotten fat and happy to the extent that we will say, oh man, we always knew that was happening, but won't do anything about it. You are risking future generations if we allow for this to stand, for the FISA court to approve every NSA's approval for actually listening to content, because the administration has come out and clearly said there are laws in place and there's oversight to ensure that nothing illegal is getting done. But I don't think the NSA can always be correct in who they are accusing or needing to go after. And if that was the case, then how many of you have heard of Brandon Mayfield, who back in 2004 is a perfect example of why we need to make sure there is more oversight, because he was falsely accused of a terrorist act in Spain, although he had never stepped foot in Spain, all because of a database kept on former military members. His fingerprint was erroneously attached to a terrorist bombing of a commuter train in Spain back in 2004, and he was actually arrested. The government actually would break into his home and check his computers. This is all before the arrest, and eventually he was arrested and investigated as being a terrorist, but not simply just from the erroneous fingerprint, which is what started it all, but unfortunately he had also taken his wife, and an Egyptian immigrant, and converted to Islam. So all these things were alarming to our government, and they actually arrested this man until Spain investigators actually found out who the actual transgressors were, and only then was Brandon Mayfield released. So that can happen to any of us. So I say, let's stand up and make sure that we are not on the brink of tyranny, and continue to be slacktivists and do nothing about it if that is the case. You've gotten a piece of my mind. I am Black Socrates, aka the Black Nietzsche, aka Franz Fanon 2.0. Follow me at facebook.com/mental dialogue, or go on Twitter at twitter.com/mental_dialogue. You've gotten a piece of my mind.